have dreamed of all my life, but put off for the sake of my family. I will see the world, live for myself, do what I want, not what is expected of me. Perhaps someday you will understand that love for your parents should not depend on the size of their bank account. Maybe you'll learn to value people not for their money, but for what they mean to you. Or maybe not. Either way, I'm no longer part of your calculations and plans. Don't look for me. Don't try to contact me. I've decided to live my life without looking back at your expectations and demands. Take care of yourselves. And remember, true love cannot be measured by money. Your mother, Vera Collins. I reread the letter several times, made a few small changes, and rewrote it in beautiful handwriting. I sealed it in an envelope and wrote on it to Marcus, Celeste, and Jeanette. Open after I leave. The next day I started getting ready for the trip. I packed a small suitcase with the most necessary things. Took all my documents and credit cards. I left the rest of my things with Dorothy. I wouldn't need them anymore. Dorothy noticed my restlessness. Vera, what's going on? You seem strange today, Dorothy, I said. I have a big favor to ask you, but first, promise me you won't try to talk me out of it. What is it? Promise. Well, okay. I promise. I told her about my plans, about the ticket to Paris, the letter to the children, my decision to start a new life. Dorothy was silent for a long time, digesting what she had heard. Vera, she said finally, are you sure this is the right thing to do? Absolutely sure. But the children, they'll be upset. They will, but not because of me. Because of the money they won't get. Maybe you're judging them too harshly. Maybe. But I'm tired of being a cash machine with a mother's face. Dorothy nodded sadly. You understand. What should I do with the letter? Give it to them tomorrow evening. When they come to visit me and didn't find it, what if they ask where you are? Tell them you don't know. It will be the truth. You won't know which hotel I'm staying at. We hugged and I could feel Dorothy crying. I'm going to miss you, she whispered. I'll miss you too. You're the only one who loved me just for who I am. No strings attached. Will you write to me? I will as soon as I get settled. On the day of my departure, I got up at 4 a.m. I left a note for Dorothy on the tablet thanking her for everything she had done for me. I called a taxi and asked to be taken to the airport. The driver, a young man of about 25, was surprised by the early call. Flying early in the morning, ma'am? Yes, to Paris. Wow. Is this your first time? Yes, and maybe not me last. Cool. Are you flying alone? Yes. And you know what? I like it. The airport was still fairly empty. I checked in, dropped off my luggage, and sat down in a cafe to have a coffee before boarding. I took out my phone and dialed Dorothy's number. Vera, my friend's sleepy voice answered. Are you at the airport yet? Yes, I'm leaving in an hour. How? Are you? Have you changed your mind? No. On the contrary, with every passing minute, I'm more and more certain that I made the right decision. Did the kids come over yesterday? Of course. Marcus brought apartment listings. Celeste brought a list of expensive restaurants we could go to, and Jeanette brought cruise brochures. Everything as usual. They'll be shocked. Let them be. Maybe it will help them rethink their priorities. Vera, Dorothy said quietly, I still think you're being too radical. Dorothy, I'm 63 years old. How much time do I have left? 10 years? 15? 20? If I'm lucky, I don't want to spend that time watching my children count my money. I understand. Thank you for everything, for your friendship, for your support, for not judging me. Take care of yourself, Vera, and be happy. I will, I promise. The boarding went smoothly. I took my seat in business class, accepted a glass of champagne from the flight attendant, and looked out the window. Below me lay my hometown, where I had lived my entire life, where I had given birth to and raised my children, where I had worked, where I had been happy with Robert. But all that was in the past. A new life awaited me. The plane took off right on schedule. Dorothy told me later that their children had come to her in the evening, all together as usual. They brought dinner, flowers, and the latest catalogues of expensive things. "Where's Mom?" Marcus asked, not finding me in the house. "She left," Dorothy replied. "Where did she go?" Celeste asked in surprise. "She didn't say anything." "She left a letter for you," said her friend, handing her an envelope. The children looked at each other. Marcus took the letter and opened it. They read it in turn, passing the pages to each other. Dorothy saw their faces change. First surprise, then confusion, then horror. "Is this a joke?" whispered Jeanette. "What joke?" Marcus replied sharply. "She's serious. Mother is serious." "But how could she?" Celeste exclaimed indignantly. "We took such good care of her." "You took care of her for the money," Dorothy said quietly. "She saw that." "That's not true," Marcus shouted. "We love our mother." "Maybe, but she didn't feel it." The children started calling me. First Marcus, then Celeste, then Jeanette. They called one after the other and all together. The phone was ringing off the hook with calls and messages, but I didn't answer. I flew over the Atlantic Ocean and thought about the life I would build for myself in Paris. When I landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, I felt free for the first time in many years. No one expected money, gifts, or favorable auditions from me. I was just a woman who had come to Paris to fulfill her dream. For the first few days, I stayed in a small hotel in the Latin Quarter. I walked along streets I had only seen in photographs, visited museums, sat in cafes and watched the Parisians. After a week, I found a small apartment not far from the Luxembourg Gardens. It was a 2-room apartment with a view of a cozy courtyard, antique furniture, and huge windows. The landlady, an elderly French woman named Madame Dubois, agreed to rent it to me for a long time. "Are you staying in Paris for a long time?" she asked in broken English. "Yes," I replied. "Perhaps forever." Wonderful. Paris loves people who love Paris. After settling into my new home, I went to the post office and bought a postcard with a view of the Eiffel Tower. I wrote a short message. "I am safe and happy. Don't look for me." I signed it simply and sent it to Dorothy's address. My friend later told me that when her children received the postcard, they tried to find out which post office it had been sent from, and even hired a private detective. But I didn't include a return address and it was impossible to find me. Gradually, the calls stopped. The children realized that I wouldn't answer and wouldn't come back, and I started a new life in the city I had dreamed of all my life. I enrolled in French classes, began studying art history, and made new friends among people like me who had decided to radically change their lives. I spent the money that the children considered theirs on myself, on education, travel, and pleasures that I had been putting off for years. And for the first time in many years, I was truly happy. It was a blatant lie. Celeste hated cleaning and always complained about not having enough time. "Mom, but I have work children." "Of course I understand. But if you could find time to do just a couple of windows a day, Dorothy would be so grateful and I would be proud of my daughter." Celeste sighed. "All right, Mom. If it's important to you, I'll do the windows." Jeanette got the most unpleasant task. "Honey," I said to my younger daughter, "Dorothy has some old things in the attic. Blankets and bedspreads that she was going to throw away. I thought, why not wash them and give them to a homeless shelter? Wash old things. Jeanette grimaced, imagining how grateful the people will be to receive clean, warm blankets. It's a good deed. But Mum, Dorothy's washing machine is small. The blankets won't fit in it. Then you can take them to the laundromat or wash them by hand. Our grandmothers did that all their lives and never complained. By hand? Janetta was horrified. Honey, if you're too lazy to spend a little effort on a good cause. No, of course not. Her daughter replied quickly. I'll do the laundry. I promise. And they got to work. Every day after work or on weekends, the children came to Dorothy's and did my assignments. Marcus bought paint, brushes and sandpaper. He scraped the old paint off the fence boards, primed them, and painted them. The work was hard. The fence was long, and the October weather was not always conducive to painting. Mum, he complained after the first day. My whole back hurts. I'm not used to this kind of work. But look at the results, I exclaimed. The fence already looks much better. Dorothy is so grateful. Celeste washed the windows from morning to night. First inside the house, then outside. She climbed up the ladder, scrubbed away stubborn dirt, and polished the glass until it shone. Mum, she said, showing her scratched hands. Maybe that's enough. Half the windows are already clean. Honey, you can't do things your way. All the windows have to be equally clean. Otherwise, the house will look messy. Jeanette carried heavy blankets to the laundry room, washed them by hand in large basins, dried them and folded them. Her hands worried from the detergent, and her nails were broken. Mum, she begged, can't we just throw the rest of the things away? There are so many of them and it's so hard to wash them. Jeanette, how can you say such things? Imagine a homeless person who gets a warm, clean blanket. Aren't your efforts worth his gratitude? The children did everything I asked them to do, even though it became harder every day. They weren't used to physical labor and tired quickly, but they kept working, because they knew there was a reward waiting for them off end. Over $1 million. I sat on the porch and watched them work. Marcus, red with fatigue, diligently painted the last boards of the fence. Celeste was on a ladder cleaning the second-story windows. Jeanette was in there rinsing another blanket. In a basin. How's it going? I asked periodically. Everything's fine, Mum, they replied in unison. We're almost done. Good job. I can see how hard you're working. I can see that you really care about me and my friends. Dorothy watched everything with amusement. Vera, she said to me one evening, what are you doing? Why are you making the children work like slaves? I'm testing their motives, I replied earnestly. I want to see how sincere their concern is. And what conclusion have you come to? That they're willing to do anything for money, even hard physical labor they've never done before. What are you going to do next? You'll see. I smiled mysteriously. 2 weeks later, all the tasks were completed. The fence gleamed with fresh paint. The windows sparkled and old clothes had been washed and folded into neat piles. Mum, Marcus said when the three of them gathered around Dorothy, we did everything you asked. We hope you're happy with our work. I'm very happy, I replied. You've shown that you're willing to work hard for your mother. That's worth a lot. What now? Celeste asked cautiously. You mentioned a will. I did, and I will definitely write one. But first, I want to rest a little and think. You see, decisions like this can't be made in haste. The children nodded in agreement with my every word. They were willing to wait as long as it took. After all, the reward that awaited them was worth any effort. Little did they know that I had completely different plans for my money and the rest of my life. A month after all the work on Dorothy's house was completed, I was finally convinced of what I had suspected from the beginning. The children continued to visit every day, but their concern was becoming increasingly intrusive and insincere. Marcus constantly brought up the subject of real estate. "Mom, I found another apartment. It's a 4-bedroom place in a new building with a view of the park. It's a bit pricey though, $500,000. But that's no problem for you, right?" Celeste suggested buying an expensive car. "Mom, you need a car. I saw a beautiful sedan at the dealership that's barely been driven. It's only $200,000. Do you want to go see it?" Jeanette instead on expensive treatment. "Mom, I read about a new method of recovery after heart surgery. There's a clinic in Switzerland where they do a full course of rehabilitation for $100,000. Will you go?" All their suggestions boil down to one thing: how to spend my money as quickly as possible and spend it on things that would end up in their inheritance anyway, or benefit them in some way. But what annoyed me most were their constant hints about my will. "Mum," Marcus would say, "it's time you started thinking about your will. At your age and after such an operation, you can't put it off." "Yes," Celeste agreed. "You need to make it official. You never know what might happen." "I can find a good lawyer," offered Jeanette. "He'll draw everything up properly." Every time I heard these conversations, I became more and more determined. The children were only thinking about money, not their mother. And they deserved a lesson. One morning, when Dorothy went to the store, I quietly got ready and drove downtown. There on Main Street was a small travel agency called Travel Dreams. I had never used their services before, but I knew the owner, Mrs. Parker, a woman my age who had opened the agency after retiring. "Welcome," Mrs. Parker greeted me. "How can I help you?" "I want to buy a ticket to Paris," I said bluntly. "Paris? How romantic. What dates?" "The day after tomorrow. And preferably one way." Mrs. Parker raised her eyebrows in surprise. "One way? Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I plan to stay in France for an indefinite period of time." "I see. Do you have a visa?" I took out my passport. Fortunately, a few years ago Robert had insisted on getting a 10-year visa, dreaming of a trip to Europe that never happened due to his illness. "Excellent," said Mrs. Parker, studying the documents. "The visa is valid for another 3 years. Then, let's find a flight." We chose a ticket for the day after tomorrow, departing at 6:30 in Themening. A direct flight to Paris cost $2,000 in business class. "Would you like to book a hotel?" Mrs. Parker suggested. "Not yet. I'll decide when I get there. All right. May I ask if this is your first trip to Paris?" "Yes. I've dreamed of going there my whole life, but it never worked out. Children, work, worries, and now I've decided it's to make my dream come true." "What a wonderful decision." Mrs. Parker smiled. "At your age, you should live for yourself." I paid in cash and asked her not to tell anyone about the ticket purchase. Mrs. Parker assured me of her confidentiality. When I returned to Dorothy, I locked the ticket in my purse and began to think about how to arrange my departure so that the children would not find out until I was already far away. That evening, I sat down at the table and wrote a letter. I wrote for a long time, rewriting it several times, choosing the right words. I wanted my children to understand not only my decision, but also the reasons that led to it. "My dear children, Marcus, Celeste, and Jeanette, I am writing this letter in my right mind and with a clear memory, fully aware of my actions. When I fell ill and needed help, each of you found a reason why you couldn't give me money for the operation. Marcus had alimony and loans. Celeste had mortgage payments. And Jeanette had a small salary and a recent wedding. These were all valid reasons and I understood them. But as soon as you found out that I had money from the sale of the house, your attitude toward me changed dramatically. Suddenly, You became the most caring children in the world. You visited every day, brought gifts, offered to help with things. That didn't interest you before. I watched you, and at first I was even happy for the attention. But gradually, I realized that your concern had a clear price tag. $1.5 million. You didn't love a mother who needed help. You fell in love with a mother who had money. Remember our conversation after we met at the hospital? You started discussing the division of the inheritance even before the house was sold. Celeste was worried about what she will get in the future. Marcus talked about dividing the money fairly. Only Jeanette tried to stop the haggling, but quickly joined in. The last month has been a real revelation for me. You did what I asked, not out of love, but out of self-interest. You painted the fence, washed the windows, cleaned out old clothes, and all the while you were thinking about one thing: how to get your inheritance as quickly as possible. Your conversations about apartments worth $500,000, cars worth $200,000, trips to Swiss clinics showed me you were already spending my money in your minds. You don't see me as a mother, but as a source of income. Therefore, I have made a decision that may seem cruel to you, but which I consider fair. You won't get a penny from me. I will spend the money from the sale of the house on myself, on what I think about your offers, Mom. Marcus spoke up again. Have you decided what to do with the money? Maybe you should invest it or put it in the bank to earn interest. I haven't thought about it yet. First, I need to recover from the operation. Of course, he quickly agreed. I just think that such a large sum shouldn't lie idle. Maybe you should talk to a financial advisor, suggested Celeste. He'll help you manage your money properly. Or buy more real estate, added Jeanette. Prices are rising. It's a good investment. I listened to their advice and realized that the children were already mentally disposing of my money. Of course, they didn't say so directly, but the motives behind their sudden concern were quite obvious. Children, I said wearily. Let's not talk about this now. I've just had a serious operation. I need rest. Of course, Mom, Celeste agreed immediately. I'm sorry we didn't think. Get some rest, said Marcus. We'll come back tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, added Jeanette. Every day until you were discharged. They left, leaving flowers, fruit, and candy. I lay there in silence, thinking about how quickly people's attitudes toward you can change when they find out about your money. Just a week ago, the children couldn't find a few thousand to help their mother. And now, having learned about the $1.5 million, they were ready to provide me with housing, give me financial advice, and visit every day. Of course, maybe I was being unfair to them. Maybe they were genuinely concerned and wanted to help. That feigning of their concern was too telling. Dorothy arrived in the evening. She brought homemade soup and some fresh magazines. How are you? She asked. Did the kids come by? They did. They found out about the house sale. Then how did they react? They suddenly became very caring, I replied dryly. Dorothy nodded. I see. What do you plan to do next? I don't know yet. First, I need to recover, and then I'll plan for the future. If you want, you can stay with me, my friend offered. I have a spare room, and I won't be lonely. Thank you, Dorothy. That's very kind of you. Think about it. Now, get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day, and everything will be fine. She left, and I was left alone with me thoughts. Outside the window, the lights of the big city were shining. And I thought about how my life had changed dramatically. I no longer had a home, but I had money and new opportunities. And I had children who had suddenly remembered that they had a mother. After I was discharged from the hospital, I moved in with Dorothy. Her house was 3 times smaller than my old one. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a small kitchen living room. But it was cozy and warm. And most importantly, I was greeted with sincere care, not greedy glances. Dorothy cleared out her guest bedroom for me, moving the most comfortable bed there and putting a bedside table with a reading lamp. Her watercolor paintings hung on the walls. My friend had been into painting since she retired. "Make yourself at home," she said, helping me unpack. "Stay as long as you need. I'd love to have company." I spent most of the first few days after the operation in bed, recovering my strength. Dorothy made light soups, made sure I took my medicine on time, and didn't force conversation when she saw I was tired. On the 4th day of my stay with my friend, the doorbell rang. Dorothy opened the door, and Marcus burst in with a huge bouquet of roses and a box of expensive chocolates. "Mum," he exclaimed when he saw me on the sofa in the living room. "How are you? How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," I replied, accepting the flowers. "I've been thinking about you every day," my son continued, settling into the armchair opposite me. "I was worried about how you were settling in, whether everything was okay." It was strange to hear this from Marcus. He usually called me once a week, more out of obligation than a desire to talk. "Mrs. Harris takes very good care of me," I said. Of course," Marcus nodded. "But it's not the same as your own home." "Mum, I've been thinking maybe we should look for an apartment for you. Something comfortable with an elevator close to the hospital." "I'm not ready to think about that yet." I understand. But when you are ready, I'll help you. I'll find some good options, go look at them, and organize everything. Just let me know and I'll take care of everything." The next day, Celeste arrived. She brought a huge pot of homemade borscht and 3 containers of cutlets. "Mum, you love my borscht," she said, setting the food out in the kitchen. "I made it especially for you. It's my grandmother's recipe." That was strange too. Celeste rarely cooked anything more complicated than macaroni, citing a lack of time due to work and children. "Thank you, dear. That's very sweet of you. Don't mention it. It's for Mum. By the way, I've arranged with my neighbor to pick up my kids from school these days, so I can come over every day to help you cook, clean up. You don't have to do that so often. You have your own family, your own things to do. Mum, the most important thing right now is your health and recovery. Everything else can wait." Jeanette showed up that evening. She was carrying a large bag from the pharmacy and a box of expensive herbal tea. "Mum," she said, placing the vitamin bottles on the table, "I consulted with a pharmacist. He recommended these supplements for recovery after heart surgery. They're very expensive but effective." I glanced at the price tags. The total cost of the vitamins exceeded $300. "Jeanette, that's too expensive. The doctor prescribed regular medication for me." "Mom, don't skimp on your health. You'll have money now. You need to spend it on the most important things." That phrase explained a lot. You have money now. Not we can help, but you have money. Over the next week, the children came every day, sometimes 1 at a time, sometimes 2, and a couple of times all together. They brought gifts, food, medicine, and offered their help with anything. Marcus kept talking about looking for an apartment. "Mum, I found a great place not far from downtown. It's a 3-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor with an elevator. Do you want to go see it?" Celeste practically took over my meals. I've planned the menu for the week ahead. Everything is good for the heart. Fish, vegetables, fruit. I'll cook it home and bring it over. Janet Beckham, my personal health consultant. "Mum, I read an article about rehabilitation after heart surgery. They recommend a special massage. Would you like me to find a good massage therapist?" At first, I was touched by their concern. But gradually I began to understand that behind all this fuss wasn't love for their mother, but interest in her money. The children constantly brought up my plans, how best to manage my capital, and the need to make. And then I came up with a plan. Children, I said one day when all three of them were gathered at Dorothy's for dinner, I am very touched by your concern. I can see how much you worry about me, and how much time and energy you spend on me. Mom, don't say that, Celeste said, embarrassed. It's all natural. Maybe, but I realize that I'm inconveniencing you. You all have your own lives, jobs, families, and then there's me with all my problems. Mum, Marcus said seriously, you're not a problem for us. You're our mother, and we want to take care of you. I can see that. And you know what? I've decided to change my will. The room fell silent. The children looked at each other. I used to plan to leave the house to the children, I continued. But there is no house anymore. But there is money. A lot of money. And I want it to go to those who really care about me. Mum, said Jeanette quietly, we don't care about Yao because of the money. I know, dear. That's exactly why I want to leave everything to you. Equal shares for the three of you. Over $1 million will allow each of you to solve your financial problems. The children's eyes lit up. They tried to hide their joy, but I could see the change in their faces. But there is one condition, I added. I want to be sure that you are truly willing to take care of me for the rest of my life. Not just with words, but with actions. Of course, Mom, Marcus quickly agreed. We'll do whatever it takes. What do you mean? Celeste asked cautiously. I'll give you various tasks to do. Nothing difficult but important to me. Whoever does them conscientiously will prove their love for their mother. The children nodded. They were ready to do anything for the inheritance. The next day I began my experiment. Marcus, I said to my son when he came to visit me, Dorothy's fence in the garden is in terrible condition. The old paint is peeling and the boards are darkened. Could you repaint it? The fence? He said in surprise. But Mum, that's not your house. Dorothy is my best friend. She took me in when I needed help. Isn't it only fair to repay her? Well, I guess it is, but I'm not a painter. I don't have any experience. It's not difficult. You can buy paint at the hardware store and brushes too. A couple of days' work and the fence will look like new. Marcus hesitated, but agreed. Okay, Mom. If it's important to you, I'll take care of the fence. It's very important, son. I'll look at the beautiful fence and think what a caring son I have. The next day it was Celeste's turn. Honey, I said to my daughter, I feel bad about Dorothy. She cares so much about me, and I can't do anything to help her. I was thinking maybe we should tidy up her house. The windows haven't been cleaned in a long time. The windows? Celeste asked. Yes, inside and out. Dorothy isn't what she used to be, and it's hard for her to climb the ladder. You have golden hands. You've always been good at housework. Friend hugged me and led me into the kitchen. She took containers of homemade food out of the bag. Chicken, potatoes, salad. Tell me everything, she said, setting the table. How did the family meeting go? I told her everything. Nothing the children's promises to help or their argument about the inheritance. Dorothy listened silently, shaking her head occasionally. They're still young, she said finally. They don't really understand what it means to lose a parent. Maybe. I agreed. But it hurt to hear it. Of course it hurt. But you know they love you, don't you? They just don't know how to help. Know. I understand that. We ate dinner in near silence. Dorothy didn't try to cheer me up or comfort me with empty words. She was just there, and that helped more than anything. "What are you going to do now?" she asked as we finished our tea. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Maybe I really will have to sell the house." The day after talking to the children, I woke up with a clear understanding of what I had to do. Marcus was right. The house had to go. It was the only way to get the money for the operation in time. Sentimentality was an unallowable luxury in this situation. After breakfast, I put on my best suit and headed downtown. The real estate agency was on Main Street in a 2-story red brick building. I had known the owner, Bobby McGregor, for many years. He had been selling houses in our town for over 20 years and had a reputation for being honest. Bobby met me in his office on the 2nd floor. He was a man of about 55, short and plump, with a good-natured face and attentive eyes. He always wore bright ties and expensive shoes. He said it was part of his professional image. "Mrs. Collins," he exclaimed, rising from his desk. "What a pleasant surprise. Please have a seat. Would you like some coffee?" "Thank you, Bobby. No coffee." I didn't have much time. He sat down opposite me and looked intently into my eyes. "What brings you here?" "I hope you are not planning to move into a retirement home." "No." I smiled at his joke. "I want to sell my house." Bobby's expression changed. He took out a notepad and a pen. "I see. May I ask why you're planning to move?" "I need money for medical treatment. I need it urgently." Bobby nodded without asking any further questions. Over the years, he had learned to understand when clients didn't want to go into details. "All right. Let's talk about your house." I remember it, a beautiful 2-story house on Elm Street. 5 bedrooms, about an acre of land. When was it built? In 1978. Robert got a promotion at work and we decided to buy a big house. Great time to build. Quality materials. Solid workmanship. "Have you done any renovations?" "The last time was about 5 years ago. We replaced the roof and renovated the kitchen and bathrooms." Robert always kept the house in good shape. Bobby made a note in his notebook. "You're in a very nice neighborhood. Elm Street is one of the most prestigious streets in the city now. It's close to downtown, but quiet. There are good schools nearby and a park within walking distance." "How much do you think the house is worth?" "It's hard to say without seeing it, but based on the description and location, I'd say around 200,000, maybe more. The market is very active right now, especially in your neighborhood." The amount was more than I expected. Even after deducting the cost of the operation, I would still have over $1 million left. "When could you come and take a look?" I asked. "This afternoon, if that's convenient." "The sooner we start, the better." "Perfect. I'll be home after 2. "Great. One more question. Are you in a hurry to sell?" "Very much so. I need the money within a month." "I see. Then we'll set a competitive price and actively promote the property. With such urgency, we can expect a quick sale." We shook hands and I went home to prepare for the realtor's arrival. I tidied up, dusted where I thought it might be needed, and opened all the curtains to let more light into the house. Bobby arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, accompanied by a young woman with a camera. They carefully inspected all the rooms, measured the floor space, and took lots of photos. Bobby took notes, occasionally discussing something with his assistant. "The house is in excellent condition," he said when the inspection was complete. "You can tell the owners took good care of it. Their layout is good. The ceilings are high and there's plenty of natural light. The yard is well kept and there's plenty of room for kids to play." "And what's your estimate?" $1.5 million. Bobby replied confidently. "Maybe even more if you find a buyer who falls in love with the house at first sight." 1.5 million. The amount seemed unreal. I never thought our family home could be worth so much money. When can you put it up for sale? The photos will be ready tomorrow morning and we'll post ads on all the major websites. Plus, we'll put up a sign in the yard and send information to colleagues in neighboring towns. How quickly can it sell at that price and in that condition very quickly? I think we'll have some serious buyers within a week. Bobby was right. The next day, calls from potential buyers started coming in. Over the weekend, 4 families came to see the house. One couple even came from a neighboring state. They were looking for a house to move to because of the husband's job. But it took a week before a serious offer came in. A young family who worked for an IT company. She was a doctor. Fell in love with the house at first sight. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and were looking for a house in our neighborhood because of the good schools. They're willing to pay full price, Bobby said on the phone. $1.5 million. No haggling. The only condition was that they wanted to move in as soon as possible. How quickly can we close the deal? Within a week, if you want. They've already been approved for a loan by the bank. All that's left is to draw up the paperwork. Then let's get started. The next few days were spent running around banks, notaries, and lawyers. We had to prepare a lot of documents, conduct a technical inspection of the house, and arrange insurance. Bobby took most of the hassle upon himself, but my presence was still required at all times. The deal was finalized on Friday morning at the notary's office. I signed dozens of papers, received a check for $1.5 million, and officially ceased to be the owner of the house where I had lived for over 40 years. After signing the documents, I immediately went to the bank, cashed the check, and transferred $200,000 to a private clinic in Houston. The operation was scheduled for Monday. Dorothy helped me pack my things. I took only the bare essentials, clothes, documents, and a few cherished photographs. I left the rest for the new owners. They were buying the house furnished. How do you feel? My friend asked as we got into the car. Strange, I replied honestly. On the one hand, it's a relief that the operation will be done. On the other hand, it's sad to leave my home. I understand, but the main thing is that you'll be alive and healthy. We drove straight to Houston. The clinic was a modern glass and concrete complex with spacious halls and the latest equipment. I was immediately placed in a private room and began pre-operative preparations. The operation was successful. I woke up in intensive care, hooked up to a multitude of machines. Dr. Rodriguez, the surgeon who operated on me, said that everything had gone smoothly and that my recovery should be quick. For the first 2 days, I was in a daze from the medication. Dorothy came every day, sat next to me, and read books to me. I didn't immediately understand where I was or what had happened to me. On the 3rd day, a nurse came to me and said that the reception desk had called. My children wanted to visit me. I didn't tell them about the operation, I said in surprise. They probably found out somehow, replied the nurse. Shall I allow the visit? Of course. They all arrived together in the afternoon. Marcus was carrying a large bouquet of flowers. Celeste had a basket of fruit, and Jeanette had a box of chocolates. They all looked worried and confused. Mum, Jeanette exclaimed, running to the bed. My God, why didn't you tell us? I didn't want to worry you, I replied weakly. How did we find out? Marcus asked, placing the flowers on the nightstand. The nurse from our hospital called us. She said you were here after heart surgery. Mom, Celeste said, sitting down on a chair next to the bed. How are you feeling? Did the doctor say anything? The surgery went well. I should be discharged in a week. What about the money for the surgery? Marcus asked cautiously. Where did you get that kind of money? I took a deep breath. There was no avoiding this conversation. I sold the house. The children looked at each other. I saw the expression in their eyes change. You sold it? Celeste asked. When? For how much? Last week. For $1.5 million. The room fell silent. The children clearly hadn't expected to. Here's such a sum. $1.5 million. Marcus repeated slowly. But that's after the surgery. You'll have over $1 million left. Yes, I will. Mum, Celeste began cautiously. What are you planning to do next? Where will you live? I don't know yet. Maybe I'll rent an apartment or buy something small. Maybe you should stay with one of us for now, suggested Jeanette. Until you decide what to do next. It was interesting. A week ago, my children couldn't find the money for my surgery, and now they were offering to let me live with them. That's very kind of you, I replied neutrally. Mum, said Marcus, I know we've had our differences lately, but we're your children, and we want to take care of you. Of course, Celeste agreed. You can stay with me. We have a spare room. We do too, added Jeanette. The children's concern was touching, but I couldn't help noticing that it appeared at the very moment they found out about the money. Thank you, dear ones. Our youngest daughter worked at a fashion store in a shopping mall, and her schedule was constantly changing. Mum, I have to work until 9 tonight. The new manager is very strict. I can't just leave early. Jeanette, this is really important. Very important. Can it be tomorrow or the weekend? No, it has to be today. Ask your friends to cover for you and explain that it's a family situation. Her daughter sighed. Okay, I'll try, but I might be late. I spent the rest of the day in nervous anticipation. I cleaned the house even though it was already clean. I made dinner even though no one was hungry. I rehearsed the words I would say to the children in my head. How could I explain the situation without scaring them too much, but still make them understand how serious it was? At 6, I heard the sound of an engine in the yard. I looked out the window and saw Marcus's old blue pickup truck. The car was already 15 years old and looked its age. Rust spots on the body, a dented fender, a cracked windshield, but it was perfectly suited for warehouse work. Marcus got out of the car, adjusted his work jacket, and headed for the house. My eldest son was a strong man of 38, but he had aged noticeably in recent years. Divorce, alimony, problems at work, all of this had left its mark on his face. Hi, Mom, he said, hugging me at the door. How are you? Let's wait for Theavers, I replied. Would you like some coffee? Beer, if you have any. We went into the kitchen. Marcus sat down at the table and rubbed his face with his hands. Hard day? I asked. Yeah, my new boss decided to reorganize everything. He says we're not working efficiently. How can we work efficiently when the equipment is ancient and people are getting laid off every month? He opened a can of beer and took a big gulp. Mum, what's wrong? You look worried. Let's wait for everyone else, I repeated. 20 minutes later, Celeste arrived. She parked her little red car next to my brother's pickup truck and hurried into the house. My eldest daughter had always been the most responsible of my children. If she promised something, she did it on time. Hi, Mom, she said, taking off her light jacket. Hi, Marcus. Where's Jeanette? She's stuck at work, I explained. But she promised she'd be here. Celeste walked into the living room and sank wearily into an armchair. At 35, she looked older than her age. A steady job, 2 children, loans, and worries were taking their toll. Mum, she said, I'm really nervous. You never get us all together like this for no reason. Is it something serious? Very serious, I admitted. But let's wait for Jeanette. My younger daughter didn't show up until 7. She burst into the house like a hurricane. apologizing and explaining that her manager wouldn't let her leave. "I'm sorry, Mom. That idiot said if I left early, I couldn't come tomorrow. I had to wait until he left and make arrangements with the girls." Jeanette was the youngest and most emotional of my children. At 32, she still seemed like a little girl. To me, "It's okay, dear. The main thing is that everyone is here." We went into the living room. The children sat down on the sofa and in the armchairs, and I remained standing by the fireplace. Whenever I had something important to say, I always stood in this spot. It was easier to gather my thoughts and not lose my train of thought. "Children, Ibegin, something serious happened to me yesterday. I was in the hospital." All three of them immediately became alert. Marcus put a can of beer on the table. Celeste sat up straight in her chair and Jeanette opened her mouth in surprise. "What happened?" Marcus asked. "I have a serious heart problems. The doctor says I need urgent surgery. Very complicated, very expensive surgery." I told them everything I had heard from Dr. Anderson about the critical narrowing of my arteries, the need for bypass surgery, and that I had no more than 2 months to live. "My God, Mom," whispered Celeste. "Why didn't you say anything yesterday?" "I wanted to figure everything out first and think about how best to talk to you." "How much does the surgery cost?" Marcus asked briskly. 200,000. The room fell silent. I could see that children digesting this information, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the problem. "Does insurance cover anything?" asked Jeanette. "Unfortunately, no, or very little." "What about the government program?" Celeste chimed in. "There's a year-long waiting list, and I only have 2 months. Marcus stood up and began pacing the room. It was a habit of his. When he was nervous or thinking about a difficult problem, he couldn't sit still. "Mum," he said finally, "I understand that this is a serious situation, and we all want to help you, but 200,000, that's a lot of money." "Ich know," I replied quietly. "My finances are in complete disarray after the divorce," Marcus continued. "Alimony, apartment, rent, car loan. I'm barely making ends meet. The most I can give is a couple thousand, and not right away." Celeste nodded. "Mike and I are in a similar situation. We just took out a mortgage and the payments are 4,000 a month. Plus kids, school, clothes, food. Mom, I'd love to help, but we just don't save that kind of money." Jeanette was the most honest. "Mom, I make the least of all of us. After all my expenses, I have a maximum of $300 a month left. I recently got married. We're renting an apartment, and we're saving money for the wedding. I can give $1,000, maybe $1,500, but that's all." I nodded. Deep down, I knew the kids wouldn't be able to raise the amount we're needed. But it still hurt to hear it out loud. "So, together you can raise a maximum of $5,000 or $6,000, I summed up. "Yes," Marcus agreed sadly. "I'm sorry, Mom, but we can't afford more." "What if we sell the house?" he suddenly suggested. The idea hung in the air. The children looked at each other. "The house is quite expensive," Marcus continued. "It's in a good neighborhood and the lot is large. I think we could get over $1 million for it. But where would Mom live then?" Celeste objected. "You could buy something smaller, an apartment or a small house with the money left over. Who's going to sell it?" Jeanette joined the conversation. "It's a complicated process with paperwork and real estate agents. I can take some time off work and help," Marcus offered. "Wait." Celeste stopped him. "How are we going to divide money from the sale? I don't mean now, but in the future." "What do you mean?" Marcus didn't understand. "Well, the house is an inheritance. If Mum sells it for treatment, what will we get later?" "Celeste," Jeanette exclaimed indignantly. How can you talk about inheritance when Mom needs an operation? That's not what I mean, Celeste defended herself. I just want to understand the situation. The house is the only valuable thing we have in our family. And if we sell it, then Mom will live. Marcus interrupted her sharply. Isn't that the most important thing? Of course it is. But I'm thinking about the future, about the children, their education. And I'm thinking about the present, Marcus countered. About the fact that our mother needs urgent surgery. Jeanette tried to intervene. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this now. Let's find the money for the surgery first, and then no, let's discuss everything right now. Celeste insisted. If we sell the house, the money has to be divided fairly between the three of us. I listened to the argument with growing disappointment. The children were arguing about money they didn't have yet, about a house that wasn't for sale yet, about an inheritance that didn't belong to them yet. And I stood there alive, but already in need of help. Enough, I said quietly, but firmly. Stop arguing. The children fell silent and looked at me. I understand, I continued. You can't help with money. That's okay. Everyone has their own problems. But hearing you argue about how to divide the inheritance while I'm still alive, it hurts. Mum, I'm sorry, said Celeste. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't mean to, but that's how it came out. Marcus came over and hugged me. Mum, we're all worried and we say stupid things when we're upset. Of course we'll help you. Whatever we can. Thank you, son. Jeanette also came over and hugged me. Mum, I'll give everything I can. Honestly, me too, added Celeste. We hugged as a family, like in the old days. But something had changed. I felt that a crack had appeared between us that hadn't been there before. All right, I said, pulling away. That's how it is. You guys gather what you can, and you'll think about what to do next. What about the house? Marcus asked cautiously. Maybe we should consider the option after all. Maybe, I replied uncertainly. I'll think about it. Their children started getting ready to go home. Everyone had their own things to do, their own concerns. Marcus had to get up early for work tomorrow. Celeste had to pick up the kids from the neighbors. And Jeanette had promised her husband she would make dinner. Mum, Celeste said goodbye. Don't be upset. We'll figure something out. Of course we will, Marcus agreed. Everything will be fine. Call if you need anything, added Jeanette. They left one by one, leaving me alone in the big house. I cleared the half empty coffee cups and beer can from the table, washed the dishes, and wiped down the table. The mechanical action helped me not to think about the conversation. But when all the work was done, my thoughts returned to their children. They had grown up, each with their own life and problems. I understood this with my head, but it was difficult to accept with my heart. When they were little, I was the center of their world. Any problem could be solved with a kiss and a hug from their mother. Now they had other priorities. At 9, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Dorothy with a large bag in her hands. Hi, she said. I thought you wouldn't feel like cooking after talking to the kids. I brought dinner. Dorothy, I said, and unexpectedly began to cry. Were asking questions about my family history and previous illnesses. The nurses treated me with professional care, but I noticed in their eyes the same expression I had seen many times while working in the same department. When the case is serious, but there is still hope for successful treatment. It's a special look, sympathetic, but at the same time businesslike and focused. Dorothy waited in the hallway the whole time. She was only allowed to come in for a few minutes between procedures. She brought me water and fruit from the hospital cafeteria, even though I didn't feel like eating at all. How are you feeling? She asked each time. Better, I replied, although that wasn't entirely true. The sharp pain in my chest had subsided, but an unpleasant feeling of heaviness and tightness remained. Towards evening, when all the tests were ready, Dr. Anderson invited me into his office for a detailed conversation. Dorothy waited in the hallway. Doctors prefer to talk to patients alone first and then bring in relatives. Dr. Anderson's office was small, but cozy. Diplomas and certificates hung on the walls and photos of his family. His wife and 2 teenage children stood on his desk. I sat down in a soft chair across from his desk where my test results, images and printouts of the examination results were lying. Mrs. Collins, he began in a serious but not alarming tone, I need to tell you the results of your examination. Unfortunately, they show serious troubles with your heart. I braced myself for the diagnosis. During my years as a nurse, I had heard similar conversations hundreds of times and knew that doctors didn't usually beat around the bush when it came to serious illnesses. You have critical narrowing of the coronary arteries, Dr. Anderson cautioned, showing me the images. Do you see these dark areas? The blood flow to your heart muscle is severely impaired. Without surgery, the situation will only get worse. I looked closely at the images. Even though I wasn't a cardiologist, I could tell that problem was serious. What kind of surgery do I need? I asked bluntly. Aorta coronary bypass surgery. It's a complex open heart operation in which bypasses are created for blood flow. In your case, multiple bypasses will be required. At least 3, possibly 4. I nodded. I was familiar with the name of the operation and could imagine how serious it was. What are the risks? I continued to ask. With modern medicine and your overall health, the risks are minimal. The success rate for such operations exceeds 95%. The problem lies elsewhere. The doctor paused for a moment, apparently considering how best to break the unpleasant news. Our hospital does not have the necessary equipment and specialists to perform operations of this complexity. You will have to go to a specialized cardiac surgery clinic. The nearest one is in Houston. And the cost? I asked the most important question. The doctor paused again, leafing through some papers. The full course of treatment, including pre-operative preparation, the operation itself, the post-operative period in intensive care, and subsequent rehabilitation will cost approximately $200. Maybe a little more depending on the complexity of the case and the duration of recovery. The amount was enormous. My pension was just over $1,000 a month, and I had virtually no savings. The last years of Robert's life were very expensive for our family. His cancer treatment consumed all our savings. Will insurance cover at least part of the costs? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Unfortunately, your insurance only covers basic procedures. Surgeries of this level are not included in the standard package at private clinics. You can try to get a quota for free surgery at a public clinic, but the waiting list is a year long. How much time do I have? I asked the most terrifying question. Based on the test results, no more than 2 months. After that, the risks become critical. You could have a massive heart attack, and then there would be nothing we could do. I thanked Dr. Anderson for his honesty and detailed explanation, took all fetus results and went out into the hallway where Dorothy was waiting for me. I could tell by the look on her face that she understood the seriousness of the situation. What did the doctor say? She asked quietly when we left the office. I need urgent surgery. Very expensive surgery, I replied briefly. Dorothy didn't ask for details right there in the hospital corridor. She understood that such conversations were better in a calm environment. She helped me get to the exit, waited for a taxi, and drove me home. We hardly spoke on the way. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled up to the house, the sun was already setting behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I usually loved watching sunsets from the porch, but today the beauty of nature couldn't distract me from my heavy thoughts. The house greeted me with its usual silence and semi-darkness. Robert always made sure the lights were on when we came, home from work or from visiting. He said a dark house looked unwelcoming and gloomy. Now I had to turn on the lights in the empty rooms myself, and each time it reminded me of how my life had changed. Dorothy helped me to the living room and sat me down in my favorite armchair, the one where I usually spent my evenings reading books or watching TV. "Vera," she said, settling down on the sofa opposite me. "Now tell me everything. What exactly did the doctor say?" I told her in detail about the diagnosis, the need for complex heart surgery, and how much it would cost. Dorothy listened attentively, sometimes asking clarifying questions, sometimes just shaking her head. $200,000, she repeated. When I finished, "That's a lot of money." "Too much for me," I admitted honestly. "What about their children?" Dorothy asked. "They should help their mother in this situation. They have jobs and income." I thought about Marcus, Celeste, and Jeanette. All three of them worked and had families, but I knew that each of them had financial obligations. Marcus had recently divorced his wife and was now paying child support for 2 children, plus rent. Celeste and her husband had just taken out loan to buy a house and were paying it off every month. Jeanette was the youngest, earned the least, and had also recently gotten married. "I didn't know," I replied honestly. "I need to talk to them seriously, but I don't want to put them in a difficult position." "Vera," Dorothy said sternly, "this is your life we're talking about. The children need to understand that." After my friend left, I was alone in their big house. I turned on all the lights in the living room, put the kettle on, and tried to collect my thoughts. But it was difficult to concentrate. Dr. Anderson's words, numbers, and deadlines were spinning around in my head. I walked around the house looking at the things that had accumulated over the long years of my life with Robert. In the bedroom, the dresser were our photos in beautiful frames. Our wedding photo where we were both young and happy. Pictures with our small children. Photos from vacations and family celebrations. In the kitchen there were children's drawings by our grandchildren and magnets from different cities where Robert and I had traveled. In the living room stood an old grand piano that my husband used to play. He was quite good at reading music. Loved to play classical pieces in the evenings. The house was really big. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, a living room, and even a small study where Robert worked on his papers. When the children were young and we all lived together, there was hardly enough room. There was constant noise running around and the children's friends coming to visit. Now, most of the rooms were empty for months. I only used the bedroom, kitchen, and living room. The rest of the rooms had turned into a kind of museum of our past life. I sat down in the armchair where Robert liked to spend his evenings and tried to imagine what Wade would say in this situation. My husband had always been a practical and far-sighted man. He worked for an insurance company, knew how to plan a budget, and make sound financial decisions. He would probably have already drawn up a detailed plan of action and begun to implement it methodically. But Robert had been gone for 3 years, and now I had to make all the difficult decisions on my own. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. Not physical, but emotional. Dr. Anderson's words echoed in my head like a broken record. $200,000, 2 months, critical risks. I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how best to talk to the children. After breakfast, I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's number. My older son was always an early riser. His job at the warehouse started at 7 in the morning. "Hi, Mum," he answered after the third ring. "Is something wrong? You didn't usually call this early." "Marcus, I need to talk to all of you. Seriously, can you come over tonight?" There was a pause on the line. My son was probably trying to gauge how bad things were from the sound of my voice. "Sure, Mom." "What time?" "Around 7 o'clock. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" "I'll explain everything to Nit," I replied and hung up. The next call was from Celeste. My eldest daughter worked as a cashier at a large supermarket on the outskirts of town, and I knew she was working the day shift today. "Mom," she said, surprised, "you know I'm at work." "I'm sorry, honey. Booty needs you all to come over tonight. Marcus has already agreed." "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "We'll talk when we meet Dot. Can you make it at 7? "Well, I guess so. I'll ask Mike." "To pick up the kids from school," Celeste said, clearly concerned. Jeanette was the most difficult. My name is Vera Collins, and I'm 63 years old. I spent 35 years working as a nurse at the local hospital, and I've been retired for 4 years now. I live in a small town in Texas, in the house that belonged to my late husband, Robert. We had 3 children. Our oldest, Marcus, is a warehouse manager. Our daughter, Celeste, works as a cashier at a supermarket. And our youngest, Jeanette, sells clothes at a mall. They all have their own homes, their own families, and their own busy lives. Since Robert passed away 3 years ago, the house has felt too big and too quiet. But it's all I have left from our life together, so I've stayed. That Wednesday morning in October, I had plans to meet Dorothy Harris, my best friend for over 20 years. She used to work as a school secretary before she retired. Dorothy has always been calm and sensible. We met years ago when our kids went to the same school, and we've been close ever since. She lives just 2 blocks from me, and we often get together to talk or go for a walk around town. That day, we had planned to meet at the post office at 10 a.m. and walk through the city center. Dorothy wanted to check out a new fabric store that had opened on Main Street. Dorothy loves anything to do with sewing or knitting. She's always making something with her hands. She's very talented, not like me. I was never very good at housework or crafts, but I do know a lot about medicine, which helped during my years at the hospital. The weather that day was lovely. It wasn't too hot for Texas in October, maybe around 25 degrees. The sky was clear, and the sun was warm, not harsh like in the summer. We walked slowly along the streets we knew so well, talking about Dorothy's home decorating ideas and the latest town gossip. "Vera, did you hear the McGregors are selling their house on Oak Avenue?" Dorothy asked as we stopped in front of a shoe store window. "They're asking close to $1 million. That doesn't surprise me," I said, shifting my purse on my shoulder. "That neighborhood is popular with young families. The houses are big, there's lots of land, and the schools nearby are good. Real estate prices are going up everywhere." We both remembered when those houses were much cheaper. Robert once suggested we move there when our kids were young, but we decided to stay where we were. At times, I regret that. Maybe it would have been a smart investment. Remember how we used to dream about big houses when the kids were little? Dorothy laughed. 3 bedrooms felt so small back then. It did, I replied with a sad smile. Now I'm alone in a house with 5 bedrooms, half of them empty. We kept walking toward the fabric shop. But as we walked, I started to feel a little off. At first, it was just a light-headed feeling, like when you stand up too fast. Then, I felt a heavy pressure on my chest, like something heavy was pressing down on me. I thought maybe it was just the air still and thick, even though the weather Wasn't too hot. Dorothy showed me pictures on her phone of fabrics she liked for her new curtains. I tried to stay focused, but it was getting harder to follow the conversation. The pressure in my chest wasn't going away, it was getting worse. Dorothy, I said, slowing down near the old pharmacy at the corner of Main and 2nd Street. Can we sit down for a bit? I'm not feeling so good. Dorothy turned to me right away. After all those years working at a school, she had a good eye for spotting when someone wasn't feeling well, whether it was a child faking illness or a teacher hiding it. What's wrong? She asked, clearly worried. You look pale and you're sweating. I touched my forehead. It was damp. Odd, since I didn't feel hot. In fact, I felt a little cold even though the sun was out. I don't know, I admitted. It feels like there's something heavy on my chest, and it's getting harder to breathe. We were passing City Bank, one of the oldest buildings in town. It had stayed the same for decades. Wide steps, tall columns, big windows. It looked sturdy and dependable. Dorothy suggested we go inside to sit down. The waiting area had soft leather chairs and strong air conditioning. But I didn't even get a chance to answer her. Suddenly, the pain in my chest became sharp, like a knife stabbing me, then twisting. My legs gave out. The world spun, and the next thing I knew, I was on the hot pavement right outside the bank. Dorothy leaned over me, her face full of fear. I could see her mouth moving, but her voice sounded far away, like I had cotton in my ears. Vera! Vera! Can you hear me? She cried. Don't move. Don't try to get up. I'm calling an ambulance. I wanted to tell her I was okay, that it was probably just heat or fatigue, but I couldn't speak. My voice wouldn't come out. The pain came in waves, sometimes sharp, sometimes a little less, but it never fully stopped. Breathing was hard. People started gathering. A young woman with a child was the first to stop. Then an older man in a plaid shirt walked over. I recognized him. He often bought newspapers from the kiosk near the hospital. Soon, there was a small group of people around me. Someone brought cold water. Someone else rolled up a jacket to place under my head. A mother took wipes from her bag and gently cleaned my forehead. These were people I barely knew, but they all wanted to help. The ambulance is on its way, Dorothy said after hanging up the phone. They'll be here in about 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes felt endless. The pain would ease for a moment, then come back stronger. I lay there on the sidewalk, looking at the clear blue sky, thinking about how fast things can change. Just half an hour earlier, Dorothy and I had been walking and chatting. Now I was lying on the street, waiting for help. Finally, I heard the sirens. A white ambulance with red stripes pulled up in front of the bank. 2 paramedics jumped out. One was a young man, maybe 30, with a serious look. The other was a middle-aged woman with short grey hair. They worked fast and knew exactly what to do. The young man knelt beside me. What's your name? How old are you? When did the pain start? I tried my best to answer, even though it was hard to talk. The woman checked my blood pressure, listened to my heart, and took my pulse. I could tell by their faces. It was serious. Years in the hospital had taught me to read the faces of doctors and nurses. Possible acute coronary syndrome, the woman said quietly to her partner. We need to get her in quickly. They lifted me onto a stretcher and rolled me into the ambulance. Dorothy asked if she could come along. They said yes. She sat next to me and held my hand tightly. Dorothy, I said as the ambulance pulled away. Call the kids. Tell them I'm in the hospital, but don't scare them. Not yet. Let's wait to hear what the doctors say, she replied, trying to sound calm. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Maybe it's just stress. or fatigue. But I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew. She was too smart not to know that this wasn't just stress dot at the hospital. They took me straight to the cardiology unit. I knew the place well. I had spent most of my working life there. The halls, the smell of disinfectant, the beeping of machines, it all felt familiar. But this time, I wasn't a nurse. I was a patient. A tall doctor in his 50s with grey in his hair introduced himself as Dr. Anderson. I remembered him. He'd started working at the hospital about a year before I retired. He was good. He listened carefully to my story, looked over the paramedics' notes, and ordered more tests. I had an EKG, an ultrasound of my heart, and several blood tests. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical procedures. I lay on a hospital bed while different specialists came in. Some checked my reflexes. Others repeated the EKG. Everyone moved quickly and spoke quietly.